Good afternoon or good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining today's presentation. My name is Maria Noesi, and I will be your moderator today. Today's presentation seeks to provide you with the opportunity to learn more about Friend2Friend, a mental health and SEL role-play simulation, as well as hear from school districts about how they're utilizing the tool. So thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules. The first is that the presentation will be recorded. A copy of the recording will be sent to you after the presentation. So do not worry about taking notes. We'll make sure that you have both the recording and the slides. Attendees are in listen-only mode, so unfortunately you won't be able to speak directly to us and the panelists. However, there is a question interface on the right-hand side of your screen where you can submit questions, comments, say hello, and we have dedicated time at the end of the presentation to have those questions asked of the panelists. Last, for those of you that are on social media, please connect with us. You can submit other questions through our Twitter account at Kognito using the hashtag #KognitoWebinars. So before we present the presenters, I want to ask a quick poll question for everybody on the call today. And so the poll is going to launch on your screen in about 1 second. The question is, has your district implemented SEL as part of the curriculum? So everybody can just take a couple of seconds to share with us where they're currently at in terms of implementing social and emotional learning as part of their curriculum at their school district. All right, we're getting some responses. We'll leave it open for a couple more seconds before we share the results with everyone. Great, let's share the results. It looks like 29% of you said yes, 47% said no, and 24% said I don't know. So there's a 47% of you that are maybe in the planning process. Somebody said that they're planning to embed it in the next school year, so that's great. Hopefully today's presentation will provide you with more context and more knowledge about how to get started or where to look for resources to do so. All right, so with that, we're going to introduce our presenters that are joining us today. So we're joined by Chris Wilson, who is the Student Wellbeing Coordinator at Johnston Community School District in Iowa. We're also joined by Chris Baer, who is a teacher and athletic trainer at Benjamin Logan Local School District in Ohio. And we're also joined by Kimberly Wieland, who is the Senior Client Engagement Executive at Kognito. So thank you to the three of them for joining us. And we're going to go ahead and get started and hand it over to Kimberly to kick us off. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks so much. I was really excited when Maria asked if I could speak on the webinar today, because this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. I started my career in education as a teacher in middle and high school, and then went on and spent about a decade creating programs for those in leadership positions and management in their career. And so what we're going to talk about today is that core skill set that is key to making students successful in their academic careers, but also in their life. And this was the same type of skill set that we were embedding in leadership curriculum for people who were managers and leading in their company. So next slide. So for those of you who are familiar with this is CASEL's 5 core competencies of social emotional learning. And it really covers the gamut, everything from self-management and how are you able to manage your own stress, to the relationship building skills of how do you connect to others, what are those communication and listening skills. And these, again, as I mentioned, are really the core skills that are going to set students up for success. And really, you know, when we were even talking to managers, were they able to have a setback, a failure? Did they have the resiliency skill set to be able to deal with that? Are they able to listen with empathy? Do they have the communication skills to build trust and deeper relationships? So next slide. So this is the product that we're going to be talking about today, and it's a really great product because it's giving some core competencies around mental health and really reducing the stigma around mental health, which is so key for students, especially in middle and high school. We know the stressors that they're facing, the types of decision and pressure that they're facing at this point in their stage of their lives. And do they have the skill set to be able to talk about mental health, to be able to reduce the stigma around mental health, to reach out to a friend that they might see in distress and they're concerned about, and then really importantly, be able to identify a trusted adult. This program is really designed for middle school and high school students, which is really great. There's not a ton on the market for this age of students that really digs into this topic and really importantly gives them the ability to practice the skills. So they're not just learning about mental health, they're really practicing some of these key skills as far as listening skills and how to be an active listener, how to use communication strategies such as reflection and paraphrasing to make the other person feel that they are being heard and listened to, and that gets them to open up more. It gives the students the ability to practice this skill set in a safe space. We know that things like communication and listening skills, self-reflection, those can be hard to practice if you're doing something like a one-on-one role play in a classroom, because you're not going to feel as open to receiving feedback on how you might improve those skills. You might be embarrassed by having to sort of perform that in front of your friends. This is going to give those students a really safe space to practice that. And all of those types of communication skills are embedded in this. The ability to reflect on what somebody has said, the ability to think outside of just your own feelings and having that cognitive empathy and being able to recognize what may be going on in the other student's life and digging deeper into that in a non-judgmental way. It teaches skill sets such as not giving advice, but helping the other person think about what they may want to do to be able to deal with that stress. And then really importantly is that skill set of being able to connect with a trusted adult. I know we're going to look at some of the change in behavior from pre to post rolling this out in the school, but one of the ones that always stands out, and I just really want to emphasize, is the student's own ability to think about reaching out to those supports themselves. So yes, they're also looking at how do they help their friend think about reaching out to support, but very importantly, doing that for themselves. Next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the specific competencies that are covered in Friend2Friend. Where I'm going to go down through all 5 of the core competencies and then look at some of those underneath. And I won't read off all of these. You guys can read them yourselves, but there are just some really important ones that I want to point out. And things like the one I just mentioned about their ability to seek help when needed. People who are able to know that they are stressed, they're able to self-reflect and see that they themselves may need to be doing some self-care or reach out when help, are much more likely to build that resiliency skill set. So when they are facing things, they know how to deal with that in a way that they can get support. Very importantly, the social awareness ones, the ability to identify social cues, both verbal and physical. The great thing about the simulation is that it is embedded with those same physical cues and those verbal cues that you would see in your real interactions with people. So you're going to hear a real human voice, and that tone is going to change based on how they're feeling. If you say something that's getting them to close down or is making them upset, you're going to hear that in their voice. You're going to be able to interpret those social cues. They're also going to move in ways that you can see them shut down. I've done this with a bunch of counselors, and they pick out the things that others may not, where, the student may fold their arms, may begin to close in on themselves if they're shutting down, and their physical behavior will change. So you're going to see that in the conversations. But in the didactic, you're also going to go over what you should be looking for in people's behavior and how those things may be changing. So your students are going to be multiply aware of some of those social cues that they should be looking for to be able to identify when someone else may be in distress. And then one of the other things is identify and use resources of family, school, and community. I'm going to talk about some of the other materials that come along with this, but this is so key, is really helping students begin to think through all of the resources that they have. And part of the conversation, if you guys get the demo and go through it, is they begin to think through what are some of the resources that they can access and who are those people, maybe not just the counselor, but other family or pieces of community that they can access. So next slide. And then these relationship management and responsible decision-making ones. This relationship management is really, really where those key communication skills come in. And where do you really go to help students learn how to communicate better? Modeling is an important part of that, so how teachers are modeling that in the classroom. But then also this ability for them to practice and get feedback from a coach, which you'll see in the demo in a second, to build those effective communication skills. So again, as I mentioned, not jumping directly into giving advice, but instead learning those empathetic listening skills, learning to not tell somebody what you think they're saying, but instead be able to reflect in a way that it's a question and you're allowing them to tell you what they're really trying to say. Communication skills such as asking open-ended questions, letting people know you're there and ready to listen. They may seem obvious, but they're not what we all immediately go to in our communication skills, and that's true of all of us. And so this is really helping them build some of that skill set, because communication skills and listening is really the crutch of how we build trust and key relationships. And then responsible decision making and really being able to think about your own decisions. It doesn't go deep into this in the simulation, but it does cover these topics as the students are trying to walk through what they would do in to deal with these different situations. And then you have the ability, if you want to go to the next slide, to use some of the other materials that we provide, such as the lesson plans and the discussion guides, to further reinforce what they have learned. There's more activities in here. There's more discussion points to talk through. There's some writing activities to reinforce some of this, and even some more role play activity if the students are beginning to open up and are willing to have those conversations. And this really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can begin to reinforce some of those things that you've already covered and dig deeper into what would a student do if they were feeling stressed or if they saw one of their friends was stressed. One of the things we know in rolling this out is that a lot of students already say they're having these conversations. The goal is to make these the best conversations that they can be and really give the students the tools that they need to support their fellow students. Students are going to be wanting to support their friends, and they want to have the skill set to be able to do that. And so we see a very strong response from students of would they recommend this to a friend and those types of questions, because they do they do want to be able to do this for their students. And the last thing I'll mention before we go into the demo is that, especially around the topic of mental health, which is not always an easy one, and there does still tend to be a real stigma around it, this is scaffolded in such a way that you're putting the students into safe space, and they get to hear other students having a really positive and functional conversation around the stress that they're having in their lives and how that may be affecting their health, their mental health, their stress level. And so you've already given them a baseline of these conversations and what they can look like and help to reduce some of that stigma. And then you have these lesson plans that you can really use to help continue that conversation. So you can't really truly understand all of this that's embedded in there until you see how the conversations work. And so Maria's going to do a bit of a demo so you can actually see what that looks like in practice.
Thank you so much, Kim. So yes, we're going to do a brief demonstration so that you get a little bit of a sense of what a student would be doing in the simulation itself. I just want to point out that because we're using a webinar interface, there is going to be a bit of a delay in what you're seeing versus what you're hearing, but we're going to send a link to all of the attendees to make sure that you have time to do this on your own and you get to experience the simulation for yourself. So before we dive into the conversation, as Kim mentioned, there is a component of this that happens first, which is to build awareness and is didactic content going over the warning signs, how mental health compares to, taking care of your physical health, just to sort of break down any stigma and increase the knowledge about mental health and how common it is and how to be a supportive friend, or even look at yourself and think about whether you might need help as well. So then we dive into the conversation, and the conversation is between two friends, Michael and Anna. So what we're going to do is engage in the conversation. We're playing the role of Michael. We've noticed that Anna has been acting differently. There was an incident that happened in the cafeteria today. So we pulled Anna aside to have this conversation, and the student has three main goals that they're trying to achieve. The first is to help Anna open up. The second is to try to understand what she's going through. And the third is to connect her with someone who can help. So let's just go ahead and get started. So as you can see on the screen, you have a couple of different options of how to interact. The first is your menu conversation buttons that allow you to choose what to say to Anna. And these choices are going to continue to evolve and change as the conversation continues. You're also going to have a feedback meter that's going to tell you how well you're doing, as well as just getting general feedback each time you make a selection, whether positive or negative. So let's go ahead and make the first selection. We're going to make an observation, and this is based off of what happened in the cafeteria earlier. So we're going to say, hey, Anna, you snapped Robbie's head off, and let's see what kind of reaction that will get us.
You totally snapped Robbie's head off.
Excuse me?
You really, unleashed your inner demon. We were like, does this girl need an exorcism?
Wow. Thanks, Michael. Is that what you guys think of me? That's great. Just what I need right now.
Hey, I'm sorry. Okay, bad joke. I just meant it's not like you to be like that.
Well, sorry. I'm just really stressed out.
So we've all been there. We've made an accusatory remark to a friend that doesn't yield the best reaction. So here we have feedback that comes up that says, you sounded critical, so Anna got defensive. Be careful about making jokes in sensitive situations. It might feel like you're making fun of the person. And it also deducted 200 points. So the purpose is every time you make a selection is not just to make the selection for sake being, but to understand the impact that choice is going to have on your friend. What is going to happen? The other nice part is that you get to see Anna's thoughts. We don't get to sometimes see what somebody else is thinking internally. We only see their external reaction.
Did I really sound that bad? Even if I did, I don't need to hear it from you. Just be my...
Oh, So Anna's reaction is, again, she has an external defensive reaction, but she's also feeling self-conscious internally that you as her close friend are criticizing her. Now, the other great part that we often don't have in real life is being able to undo, to go back in time and take back what we've said. In the simulation, the students will have the ability to select and see what would have happened had they chosen a different option. So we're going to go ahead and undo. And this time, we're going to still make an observation, but we're going to be a little bit more conscious of not being accusatory. So we're going to go and say, you haven't been hanging out as much lately. What's going on?
It seems like you haven't been able to hang out very much the past couple weeks. What's been going on?
I know. Things are kind of intense at home again, so I always have to help out. This is literally the one afternoon I had free.
What do you mean? What's up?
Just my older sister being awful, being herself, and everyone else just has to deal with it.
She's acting up again?
Yeah, she's like drinking too much all the time or coming home high. My parents are screaming at her, she's screaming at them, and I have to take care of my little sisters and try to keep them from hearing all the screaming.
So this is a very different outcome than the previous choice. And again, your feedback meter has increased. You've scored 400 points for getting her to open up. You've scored a new badge for asking questions, an open-ended question that allows her to expand this beyond just a yes or no. And the feedback you're receiving is asking Anna what's been going on, encourage her to open up. You also brought up what you noticed. You haven't been hanging out with us as much in a non-judgmental way. So this goes on and on throughout the simulation for about 25 minutes, and you have hundreds and hundreds of options of how the conversation is going to go. And again, as each selection is made, you're receiving feedback of why that was a good choice, why that may have been a bad choice. You're able to, see what the consequences of your choices are having on your friend. And the ultimate goal, as you saw before, is to get Anna to open up about what's happening, talk to her, understand what's going on with her, and if necessary, how to get Anna to open up about talking to a professional or a trusted adult within the school community. So that's just to give you a little bit of a taste. So, and again, as I mentioned, we're going to send you a link to this after the webinar so you can try this out at your own pace. But with that, I'd like to hand it over now to Chris Wilson, who is the Student Wellbeing Coordinator at Johnston Community School District in Iowa. Take it away, Chris.
Hi, thanks everyone. I just was asked to tell you a little bit about our experience implementing Kognito. You can see on the next slide, if you'll switch that for me. Just a little snapshot of what our district looks like. So we're a fairly large district in suburban Iowa, and we've seen a big demographic shift in the last few years. We actually started implementing Kognito when we were working on implementing a district-wide student well-being plan. It's not in direct response to, but we had experienced some students experiencing more mental health concerns, more suicidal ideation. We have lost several students, death by suicide, and so looking at mental health and the mental health needs of our students was a priority. We actually started out by using the Kognito gatekeeper trainings that we used with teachers. So that's how we got introduced to Kognito. If you could switch the slide for me, that would be great. Based on our experience with implementation and adults, we piloted looking at the Friend2Friend program with a few students just to get their feedback. So when we had kind of our opportunity to review the materials, we actually got student input on the materials, and it was very favorable. The adult response to the materials was very favorable, and so we brought it as an opportunity to our health team to look at implementation with their mental health unit that they provide in the 8th grade and 10th grade health course. It's part of that mental health unit. It's not a standalone lesson that we do anywhere. And so what we were able to do is take some of the materials that they were just talking about and adapt those into making it really fit in with what they were currently teaching in mental health. So our lesson plan talks about a few specific resources that we have available to our students right here. We are one-to-one iPads, so all our students have access to an app called A Friend Asks through the Jason Foundation that can connect them immediately to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline and give them tips on talking to a friend if a friend might be struggling. We also provide them information on our student assistance program, our district student assistance program. We have a number that's answered 24 hours a day by a licensed clinician. And then we have other resources in like our counseling office and those sorts of things that we direct them to. After the students complete the simulation in their health class, they complete the pre and post, but then we also have an exit slip just created on Google Forms, but each student completes an exit slip that gives them an opportunity to privately ask to see a counselor after they're done with the simulation. And because those are kind of real time, the teacher is able to look at the responses, and our counseling office is kind of on call during our implementation times, and we get those kiddos in to see a counselor right away. We've had several kids take us up on the opportunity. We had one student who actually ended up needing really serious care, needed a suicide screening. He had been suffering silently for quite some time, and after this Kognito lesson, he realized that there were some resources out there, and we were ready to provide him support if he asked. So that's been a piece of the implementation that I think is unique to our district, but it's given us a lot of peace of mind in knowing that we give kids an opportunity to talk to someone if they're worried about themselves or they're worried about others after they've learned these great skills. We really haven't had much for pushback or any barriers that we've had. We've run into a few technology kind of situations, but I will say that Kognito is amazing in helping us troubleshoot. Their tech support is always available whenever we need them to say, hey, this isn't working, this isn't working. They've worked with our IT department and been able to figure out solutions for us. Really for our community, we wanted to empower students to take a stand and make sure that they had the tools that they needed to help a friend or to get themselves to help if they needed it. And I think if you would switch to the next slide, please. We have some results from our implementation. And so as you can see, those are fairly impressive results for what our district is seeing as far as outcomes for implementation. One of the ones that's really impressive to me is their willingness to take someone that they are worried about, who is stressed out, to an adult who can help. That's a pretty impressive change from pre to post there, and really that's something that we wanted to strengthen. Anecdotally, our counselors in both the middle school, 8th grade, and the high school, 10th grade, feel like they have an increase in the number of students who are being brought to them by others, especially during our Kognito implementation. And we find that we're actually getting kids from friend referrals a little bit earlier than we might have. In the past, we noticed students were waiting till there was a crisis situation or till the situation got really difficult and they were aware it was too much for them to try and support or handle. Now we're seeing students bringing kids in when they are stressed or when they're just a little worried about them. And we're able to get better supports in place earlier. So students don't have to get to the point of crisis or struggling before we connect them with the right resource. So we have had nothing but positive feedback. It will be interesting to see the difference in Now, we'll be having some students who did get the training in 8th grade and will get the training again in 10th grade. I believe because the simulation is different each time someone does it, it's a little bit of a unique experience depending on what questions or the way you answer the different questions. So I believe it'll be a different enough experience for the students based on their maturity and just where they are with answering those questions and what they've learned over the years, that it really is not a duplication or a repetition, but it's kind of a planned, intentional way to give them new supports as they face kind of more independent choices in their sophomore years. I think as best practices and lessons learned for us was implementing that exit slip. And so making sure that we give kids an opportunity to have a conversation with a counselor and having those counselors available. So not just saying, well, yeah, we'll get you to someone, but now we have our counseling team on call when we're doing Kognito. So we know at least one counselor in the building will be available to talk to kids right away. We have a practice that we don't let them leave the building. If they have said that they wanted to talk to someone, we get to them that day. And I think that's been a positive kind of lesson learned, that we feel like we're getting the right supports to kids and doing it in that manner. I'll let you switch to the next slide. Thank you. We do have some good feedback from students. We do get, some students who say, it's goofy or whatever, but really that's not the norm. The norm is pretty positive feedback, and we typically have a really quiet, as the kids are going through the simulation, it's quiet, they're engaged, they're interested. We don't have a lot of side talking or anything like that. They work on it and are engaged with it, and I think our outcomes show that. I'm happy at the conclusion of our conversation here when we're in the question and answer period to answer any questions about our implementation or kind of outcomes that we have and how we got to those. Any questions you might have, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Chris. There's a ton of questions that have come in so far. We'll definitely have time at the end to address those. And for those of you, please keep submitting your questions, and we'll make sure to get to them either on the session or offline. So now I want to introduce Chris Baer, who is the teacher and athletic trainer at Benjamin Logan Local School District in Ohio. Chris, take it away.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak today. I found out about this webinar because we were given an email, I think that was about 6 months ago, correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, but we had a chance to continue with our Friend2Friend simulations in Ohio by joining a co-op and joining in 3 different webinars to learn more about this type of education. Those webinars proved very beneficial for me, and I think will for our community and our school district, because we're going to continue to implement some other programs in the near future, hopefully in September with our staff, and continue. I'm going to continue in the Friend2Friend seminars with my students in my health class. I learned about Friend2Friend a couple of years ago through an email. It was very easy to access, and I am not tech savvy at all. I've been teaching for 25 years, and computers and I don't always get along, but this program works very well. It's now available on an app, with which I was hesitant at first to like the idea that it was only going to be available on an app. It has since in the state of Ohio. It is available on an app on a phone, and still available on the computer for our kids that don't have access to the app. And that worked out very well. This was our first semester of using both. My students like both of the programs. We get really good feedback from using this. Thank you for advancing that. We're we're a rural district. We don't have nearly the students that Chris sees. We're around 2,000, 130 graduated, just around 130 graduated this past Friday from our high school. We have 3 buildings, elementary that is K through 4, a 5-8 middle school, and then our 9-12 high school. Right now, we are only implementing Friend2Friend in our high school and in the health classes. We are trying to outreach similar programming in our middle school. We have unfortunately had some experience of students who have completed suicide within our district and in our surrounding districts in Logan County. Recently, I would say within the last couple of years, I have seen more of that type of situation than the past 23 that I was teaching. I also have the experience of being an athlete trainer, so I get to see children and our athletes in a different light besides just in the classroom and the pressures that they face there. And for any of our students or our athletes or student athletes, to be able to learn how to speak more openly about issues that they're facing is always a positive thing. And to be able to talk to each other and help their friends to seek out help from adults is also very important to us. So it's kind of what we're coming from. We are predominantly Caucasian. We are close to Honda of America, so we do have some Asian, and we have very little diversity. We're a rural public district in a predominantly Caucasian community, and we're located out in the country. We're not in the city. If you can advance the next slide. I think I've covered some of that. Yeah, I think I've covered this one, so we can go ahead and go to the next one. As far as our results, and I just lost my screen. Hold on. Okay. Our results and going with what we've had in our experience, I think it's very favorable. I am glad that our students are able to feel more confident with the categories and the areas. One thing that concerned me that came out in the co-op that I took part in was that I had recently seen during that, had seen some statistics that our students were not trusting of adults for various reasons. And to see that they make the advancements after doing this program to want to have more confidence to see and give a friend help is very encouraging. Again, I have probably walked more students down to the office this past year than I have in any other year combined. We are seeing an increase, definitely on the rise of issues. Our school district has implemented, not only have I implemented Friend2Friend, but our school district has implemented, we have hired an additional counselor. We have 3 counselors at our high school and one counselor at our middle school, 1 at our elementary. So 5 total on staff now that do their various activities and assignments during the day. But there is one of those 5 is devoted simply to talking with our kids, and she is here every day and being here for our students. So that's encouraging that more things are happening to help with this subject and mental health issues. If you want to go ahead and advance, it's fine. Okay. This feedback is also very encouraging for us. I think I would agree with the top in purple. It's very easy to understand. It's very I can't think of the word that I'm looking for. It's easy for the kids to do. They understand it better than I do most of the time. And it's nice to see that they were able to do this for the first time. We did the hands-on activity. My classes this semester liked to role play. So after we did the simulation online, we did the role playing, and I was given positive feedback from all of them. I have not had really any, like Chris, I have not had any barriers to the implementation. I was worried about the Friend2Friend when it went to app, but then again, we got it back to being able to do it on the computer. So that barrier went away rather quickly. Kognito has done an excellent job of helping with that. My personal cell phone wasn't even capable of getting the app, and we figured out how to fix that and figured out that some of my kids didn't have access to it, and we were able to get around that. So that's was a very good thing for us. I think, as the student says here, is realistic about what happens in people's lives, and I believe the simulations are. I would have to second that. And when you were watching the demo of the simulation and seeing that it gives them the chance to correct their behavior or correct what they say, and also gives them the chance to think about what they're going to say before they say it. That doesn't always happen in real life. So being able to practice that and having it accessible to them when they need it and they can go back and practice it at any point is a very valuable tool. You can go ahead and advance the slide. I guess we can go with questions unless we have something else. That's the summation of how I found out about it. So here we go.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'd like to thank both Chris Wilson and Chris Bear for their presentation, and Kim as well. So we're now going to start the Q&A portion of the webinar. As I said, please submit any questions you have. As a reminder, we are going to be sending you the recording and the slides after the webinar, so don't worry about that. I see a lot of questions in regards to the slides and the recording. The first question, and it would be great to, I know each of you covered it a little bit, but to hear from everyone, we'll start off with Kim. The question is this something that can be incorporated over several days or just a one-time lesson experience? Kim, if you want to kick us off with an answer, and then we'll pass it along as well.
Sure. So the lesson plan is built in such a way that you can spread it out over several days. Each section is meant to be about 45 minutes long, so you could have several days of 45-minute segments. I know Chris said that she did the role play, so she can give a little bit more background on that. But really it's meant as an introduction, simulation, and then several reinforcement activities. So if you had a double period, you could put two of those together. As Chris Wilson had mentioned, they build it into some of their other curriculum. So there's just a lot that can be done with this, and the lesson plan is meant to be very flexible.
Great. Chris Wilson, anything you'd like to add?
We do use it during a block. That's typically when we do Kognito, is during a block. That gives time to talk to the students beforehand and provide the lesson plan, and then they go in and do the simulation, and it allows time at the end for some discussion too. I don't think it has to be done that way. You could just spread it out over a couple days as well. I think we could do just the simulation very easily in one class period. If that was, all we were doing, that could be done in one class period, but we like to incorporate some other pieces of it and feel that's it's best to do with the lesson plan and the information from the lesson plan, so that does take a little bit longer.
Great, thank you. Chris Bear, any other thoughts?
Yeah, we do the simulation in a day. We have a block schedule. We have a 80-minute class period. So we do the simulation, we discuss, and it's a part of our mental health unit. And then we typically will revisit the next day in the unit with the lesson plans and the one-on-one simulations of doing the simulation wrong and then doing the simulation correctly, and then that generates more discussions. We spread it out over a couple of days.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, do your health teachers get any additional training to teach the mental health unit, or do they collaborate with mental health staff? And we'll start with Chris Wilson.
Yes, we actually, that is one thing that our teachers identified, that they wanted more training in order to feel like they could best utilize the Kognito work. And so we actually spent a half day in professional learning. And we have some school-based therapists. And so those school-based therapists help provide training for our staff. I was able to provide training for our staff. And then we practiced, and we practiced different scenarios. And we kind of created our own little implementation guide, because we do have more than one person teaching it, so that we all were implementing consistently. So we did about a half day of professional learning. We meet monthly as a team, and so we do revisit things that come up. And if there's a new bit of information or something like that, then we're going to go ahead and get that out to our health team. One of the pieces that they really wanted to know more about were the resources in the community. And so we've had people come from our different resources, our student assistance program, and looked at our app that we can give kids to help access support. So we do ongoing professional learning, but we did spend at least a half day before we implemented Kognito.
Great, thank you. Chris, any thoughts you'd like to share as well?
Sure. We have quite a few that we have access to. As far as that, I'm the main health teacher at the high school. We do have one other teacher who teaches one class. I have 5 during the year, and she has 1. We have mental health first aid training that is offered actually through our community resources. It's an 8-hour training that I have gone to. One of our counselors at the high school has attended, and our middle school health teacher has also attended for mental health first aid for teens. And I've attended mental health first aid for adults as well. We are implementing a BOTFIN life skills program next year that we received additional training on. This year, again, myself and the middle school health teacher and also our school resource officer went through that training. We've had gatekeeper training through a local mental health agency in our county. And we're also going to our teachers, as well as I heard Chris mention that her teachers wanted more training on how to speak with our kids. So in September, our all-day in-service is devoted to mental health. And the first half we have a speaker coming in, and then the second half in the afternoon, our teachers will be discussing the at-risk for high school, at-risk for middle school, and at-risk for elementary educators that's offered through Kognito. We're going to have them do the simulations prior to that day, and then we're going to hold discussions on those after we hear from our speakers.
Great, thank you. The next question I'm happy to answer is, how does Kognito tailor the training for youth in middle school versus youth in high school? So the Friend2Friend simulation supports both middle school and high school students, and the content itself covers what a middle school or high school student will experience, whether that's academic stressors, pressures for being an athlete, to pressures from friends or things that may be going on at home, whether that's a sibling or a divorce or a loss of a loved one. The content of the simulation is relatable across that age group, and as you heard from our panelists, every time you access a simulation, you might have a different experience because the choices are so different. So you're going to the student will talk to Anna and ask different questions, approach the conversation differently, and still have a unique learning experience and come away with some of the goals that are set forth at the very beginning of the conversation. So although the conversation covers both middle school and high school, the content is built in a way that is relatable in our real life experiences that an 8th grader, a sophomore, or a senior in high school might be experiencing from an academic, athletic, personal life standpoint. The next question is, now, and I'll open this up for all of 3 of our presenters, is would this work as an after-school project coming from an outside program to implement into the school, or should this be a school project? And I'll start with Chris Bear if you want to share any insights on whether this should be something that comes within the school or if an outside program can be implemented into the school.
I think it would be difficult in our situation to have an outside resource come in. We have a very good counseling center in Logan County that comes into our schools now and speaks actually as guest speakers in our classroom for a day, and then come back. Then they come back on a different day and do health screenings for our students and students at the middle school. We also have that same group that comes in and will do surveys to find out background research on what our students are thinking in terms of the mental health. As far as this program, I think it would be difficult for them, one, because of their limited resources, and two, I would like to keep it within the school itself, because I think it fits very, very well into a unit. So if you're one of the key teachers that is implementing this, it not only fits well into your unit, it gives the students a variety of how you're presenting a topic that is very difficult to deal with. And honestly, I think it builds trust between you and your students, because it helps you to open up. Because I've done this simulation 3 or 4 times to make sure I learn more about it every time I do it, to be able to share with the students. So I'd hate to see just an outside company come in, I don't want to call them a company, but an outside resource come in, throw this at them, and then leave. I would rather make it more personal with my students.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Chris Wilson.
I would echo absolutely what Chris said. I think you could do it. I mean, this is something that an organization could provide as a lesson that they came in and provided to a health class. It's definitely a possibility, but I think one of the best things about Kognito is the lines of communication and discussion that it opens between the teacher and the students. And so you would lose that if it was an outside presenter. And also, for us anyway, we want this to be a universal strategy that our school is invested in. And so it's one of our universal SEL strategies. And so we want to be accountable for the implementation and the outcome.
Great, thank you. The next question is, yes?
Sorry, Maria, this is Tim. I was just going to add to that. We do have some examples of outside organizations who are doing it, but they are doing it really in partnership with the schools. So they are making sure that the teachers have received, whether it be our at-risk training, so that they're prepared to have those conversations, because we do know that kids will be reaching out to trusted adults more. They're making sure that the students know what the resources are from the school, and they're working with the principal and counseling staff to make sure that they have all of that embedded in what they're doing in the lesson plan. So it is possible, but you have to be doing it really in coordination with the school, to both of Chris' presenters' point, to make sure that the resources are there when these kids start to reach out to trusted adults.
Great, thank you. The next question is this an evidence-based program? And I'll just add, quick answer is yes. Kognito has a portfolio of simulations in the K through 12, and we do a lot to validate our methodology in building these tools. Our core portfolio, which I think Chris Bear mentioned that they're also utilizing for educators, achieves the same thing. It's our role-play simulations for elementary, middle school, and high school that build awareness and skills on mental health and suicide prevention. And we have been proven in numerous studies to have evidence and efficacy in increasing confidence, behavior changes, and attitudes towards mental health and suicide prevention, and how to be a gatekeeper, and how to talk to a student, intervene, and if necessary, how to make that warm handoff to support services. So we have a numerous research that are out there that validate the efficacy of how Kognito's programs are being utilized and how effective they are I'll open it up to Kim if you have any additional thoughts from your experience on having these tools implemented across the country.
Yeah, I think the one piece I would add to that is also what it is built on is also evidence-based. So there's a lot of embedded motivational interviewing and other evidence-based communication skill set that is embedded in the curriculum. So we are evidence-based on our outcomes and our implementation models, as well as the communication strategies and the social emotional learning strategies that are the basis of the training.
Great, thank you. There was a couple of questions for Chris Wilson about how did the idea for an exit slip come about? How were you able to implement that, and any sort of how-to tips that can be quickly shared for others on the call?
Sure. We kind of have, it's not a policy, but it's just a protocol that we follow. Anytime we are working with kids on mental health issues, we want to give them an opportunity to privately connect to a resource or the right resource within that, short time frame. So within the same day, kind of like strike while the iron is hot and make sure that we don't stir up things. I mean, we've had a lot of loss in our district, and so talking about these topics it's not abstract. I mean, we're talking about kids and friends that they have lost, and friends who are struggling, who are maybe no longer in school because they're hospitalized. And so we wanted to be really sensitive about that. And it's really simple. It's like, I think it's 5 questions. And basically it just asks, do you want to see a counselor because there's something that you're either you're worried about yourself or a friend, or something you want to talk about more? And everybody has to answer that question. So it doesn't give them an option to move on until they've answered that question. And several years ago, we were kind of old school paper penciling that for some different topics that we were covering with mental health. And adding this Google form now that we're one-to-one iPads has been a real game changer, because we can get kids to the support faster. So it's really just kind of our district protocol and discussion about how we can make that be the most efficient that it can be. It's very simple, but it seems to work for us.
Great, thank you so much. There's one last question that has come up a lot, which is in terms of the cost of the program. I have added our info@Kognito email address. So our pricing is based on the size of your school. So we want to make sure that we just give it based on the size of your school district or your individual school. So if you have a question about pricing for the Friend2Friend simulation, please shoot us an email here, and we will get back to you right away with information based on the size of your school or individual school district. But you're able to train everyone with one license of institutional license of the Kognito simulation. With that, I want to open it up for any closing thoughts from each of our presenters. I'll start off with Kim. Just thoughts you want to share as folks begin planning for the next school year, and how they can think about, that 47% that currently does not have an SEL program as part of their curriculum.
Yeah, I would just reiterate some of the things that have already been said, and that is, how do we make sure that kids really get the chance to not just learn some of these skills, but be able to practice them and feel prepared and confident to use these skill sets. And we know that students respond really well to these simulations, and they want this skill set. They're actually asking for it and would actively recommend it to a friend. So making sure that as we're looking on what to build out, we're tackling the things that we know the students are already struggling with and really want to have as part of their curriculum.
Great, Chris Wilson.
Sorry, thank you. 2 things I would say. One, on that cost piece, it is extremely economical when compared to some other evidence-based programming that we have implemented. And so I wouldn't let cost necessarily be a reason that you don't check it out. And secondly, I think I am not always a fan of online trainings and those sorts of things, especially when we're working on topics like these. But if you hold that belief, I would say take time to go through the simulation because this is really different than any other online training you might have experienced before. It's extremely engaging. It's not something kids can just sit in front of and kind of glaze over. They have to be an active participant. And so it really kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities of using an online simulation.
Great. Chris Bear, take it away.
I would say if you're in Ohio, there's no cost to my school district because I participated in the co-op this past spring. And I believe there's another one coming up that's possibly this summer or this fall. So, and I found out about that through an email. So if you're in a school district in Ohio, keep an eye on your emails because the Suicide Prevention Coalition, they're working in Columbus to give us more opportunities to help our kids. So for us, it's very economical. I think they have some grant money that they're trying to use to help us in Ohio.
Thank you so much. And again, yes, if you are in Ohio, please connect with us. You can reach out to Kognito and we can connect you to the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation. The email is on your screen right now. It's info@kognito.com. So you can reach out to us if you want pricing information or if you're looking to learn more and if you're in the state of Ohio. With that, I want to thank our panelists for joining us, Chris Wilson, Chris Bear, and Kim Wieland. Thank you so much for your content and for sharing your insights with everyone today. And I also want to thank all of our attendees for joining us. I hope that you have a great rest of your week and enjoy your summer. Take care.